Okay, welcome. So we are doing a webinar today about getting closer to the birth story that you want and need, and really honing in on aligning with the birth story that you want. I'm an acupuncturist and I do a lot of perinatal work. And Francesca here is a doula, so clearly she does a lot of perinatal work. So let's get started. We're gonna talk about fully aligning with the birth you want. So Francesca, go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know everything about you.
Yeah. Hi everyone. It's great to meet you all. Like Marie said, my name is Francesca. I work as a birth doula, a postpartum doula. I teach childbirth education, prenatal yoga. So I wear a lot of different hats in the perinatal world all across the reproductive spectrum. And yeah, throughout the years in being witness to women, to birthing parents, to families, I've really been able to build a practice and an approach to care that is able to touch on all of the main layers of, or what I think are the main layers of human beings. We have that physical component, the mental, the emotional, and then for those who are interested in it, that spiritual, more metaphysical approach as well. So within each of those pillars, there's so many things that we touch on in terms of preparing the body for birth, preparing the mind and the emotions for birth. And we'll just, be going into all of those today in this conversation. But yeah, that's the most brief version of my bio and my introduction. Marie and I have been lucky enough to work together. We've met through a local birth center called Tourmaline Birth and Wellness Collective. And so it's at that space that we've been able to kind of join forces and share clients, and then just share different ideas about how both of our offerings and services are touching in on this mental emotional world for women before they show up to their birthing experience. And really ultimately the goal is getting them to a space where they can really surrender into what their body is bringing them through.
Yes, definitely. Well, thank you and welcome. I'm so excited to
Thank
get
you.
really into this. You and I first met at the birth center. We're both working there. And we are just all about emotions and stress and how it affects the body and how, especially around pregnancy and birth and postpartum and everything and motherhood in general. So when we first met each other, we were like, friend. That's why I felt. I was like, "Please, another one."
Yeah. Oh
Uh,
my gosh. Yes. Mutual
I'm
feelings.
like, do you want to have some tea sometime? And I think that the first time we went, just a little funny side note, when we went to tea, was it with you? And I kept getting those scones that they said were gluten free, and then
Yes, yes, over at Plants and Coffee, and you're or no, it was at Palmies.
yeah,
Yeah, we were
it was just so
heartbroken.
funny. And I avoid gluten because it doesn't treat me good in general, but not like allergic or anything. So it was just funny. I was like, oh, do you have the gluten free fig ones? It was like our first, and they were like, those are. It's like,
Yeah.
anyways, funny side note. Anyway, so when we first started talking with each other about what like really we are passionate about in this birthing world and in this perinatal, prenatal, postpartum, even before pregnancy, was that the emotional component and how it affects our body and how it affects our birth and how it affects our pregnancy and postpartum, everything, our motherhood, everything. And It's interesting because we live in San Diego, California, and we were talking earlier about how this is like the mecca of like this kind of care around pregnancy and childbirth and like holistic care and stuff like that. And even friends and old patients that have moved away that reach out to me to get these kinds of services, and I try my best. Sometimes it just doesn't hit the right chord in like in their spaces. So we wanted to come together today and kind of tell you guys what we talk to our patients and clients about every single day. And I give unsolicited advice. I'm like, you're pregnant? Let me tell you something. I'm like, here's some tips and tricks. And they're like, I didn't ask you, lady, at the car wash or whatever. I'm like, oh, okay. And like my siblings, they get all of my unsolicited advice as well. Um, but
That's
we
what they're there for.
Yeah, totally. But we wanted to come and talk about how how we talk to our patients, and really we are mindset holders, not just space holders. We're both, but it really, when it comes to talking to somebody that's wanting to get pregnant, is pregnant, wanting to have their baby naturally, not naturally, with at a hospital, not a hospital, in the middle of a field, whatever it is. And I always tell my patients, like, whatever makes you less stressed, you do that kind of birth.
Yes.
And then you will always succeed. If it makes you less stressed to get um, a, a, a scheduled C-section where you're like, I'm 6 weeks pregnant now, I'm going to talk to my doctor, this is when we're doing it, do that, because stress is really the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back, that can really set you into a tailspin. When you're pregnant, you have so many hormonal shifts going on, so many shifts going on in your body, and growth, and your true north is shifting as well. You go from, being not a mom at all to taking care of a human for the rest of your life. And that's a huge, scary shift. And then if you're having another child, to only have one child that you're taking care of, and then all of a sudden there's another child, and you're like, how do I split my love? That seems impossible. So these are some things that we talk to patients about, and
Mhm.
we think it's really important. So, I wanted to ask you, Francesca, um, we were talking about a specific patient of yours, and when it comes to being a mindset holder,
Mhm.
as well as a space holder as a doula, but how you, just an experience with a patient, have helped you understand that you needed to shift the way you approach and talk to birth, talk to your clients about birth, about everything, so that it's just that like little shift, right? It's like that center in your brain is for pain. It's right next to the pleasure center. So these things in life, they're just these little shifts. And if we can give you some tips and tricks you could do on your own, give you some ideas of how to reach out for resources. If you live in San Diego, we are here for you. If not, you can reach out to us and we can help you. But the kinds of people you need to look for that are your jam. So let's
Mhm.
go. Can you, excuse me, can you talk to me about kind of that shift and how that
Yeah.
works for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I, in the last few years have focused so much on providing as much information to families as possible. Evidence-based research articles, having conversations, childbirth education material, spinning babies philosophy and practices. And so my approach has been very mental, very executive function, really wanting to instill this information, because when we have information, that's where then we can build confidence, this sense of empowerment, and this sense of knowing what decisions we want to make for ourselves, for our baby, for our families. We're not
Mhm.
really able to make those decisions or stand up for ourselves in a more medicalized setting where maybe we're feeling some of the pressures of protocol or just the way things kind of go in different environments. And so when we're able to guard ourselves and amplify our voices with information, then we hold a greater conviction in the way we carry ourselves throughout our pregnancy and in our birth.
And in decision
And
making. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. Um, but as I've gone to a few different births in the last few months, I have found that a lot of my moms have kind of gotten trapped or stuck in that thinking executive function type of place where they're tracking every single contraction or wondering, okay, what's this sensation? What's that sensation? And they're approaching their birth experience from that same mindset that we had when we were learning about everything.
Mhm.
And so that invited me to take a couple steps back and look at, okay, I'm seeing this pattern across the board with a lot of my moms. What's the shift that I can make for them? How do we switch out of being in a little bit more of this anxious, thoughtful planning type place during the birth?
Yeah.
And it's, we kind of have to do the complete opposite. Honestly, we have to
Mhm.
go from being very academic and thoughtful and planning to then moving into different practices that allow us to integrate that information into the body
Mhm.
and return ourselves back to that wisdom that lives inside our body. And that is so much of what we hear within doula support or holistic birth support, whether you're seeing an acupuncturist or a massage therapist. Any practitioner in this realm is going to tell moms and parents, trust your body. Your body knows how to do this. Our bodies have been doing this since the dawn of time.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to say that and think it. And then it's another thing to sit there in silence, hold on to your body, take some breaths, bring your, internal awareness and internal gaze into your physical body,
Yeah.
and have that internal communication and that internal relationship there where you can reassure yourself, I've been doing all the things I need to do. I've been learning what I need to learn. And all of those things are really just to get your mind on board and get your mind to believe what
That's a
your
good question.
body already knows. Right? We're not doing any of this education or any of this training so that our body's like, oh yeah, I remember how to give birth.
Yeah.
Your body, you didn't have to think your way into conception. You didn't have to think your way through growing this baby, right? You didn't have to be like, okay, I now need to grow all of the veins and the kidney and the hair follicles, right? All of this is an automatic process. And it can be very automatic in birth as well if we can get out of our heads. So it's a very fine line in balancing educating ourselves, empowering ourselves, making sure that if it comes to it, we can be our own best advocates.
Mhm.
And at the same time, getting all of that out of the way and turning the mind off so that the body can take over. So that's a lot of what I do in my sessions. We will kind of float between many of those things. I encourage all of my clients and all of my moms to come to my yoga classes each week so that after we have one of our 2-3 hour sessions, like, okay, let's, come see me this week. We're going to get into our bodies. We're going to move and just allow that stuff to settle in where it needs to.
Yeah. And I think that's so true. It's interesting. When I was in grad school for Chinese medicine, they talk about it's like a cultural thing as well. So culturally, um, we need as Americans to kind of know what's what and why and how and when and
Mhm.
where and what color and all the things. And that's okay because that's our culture. That's how we were raised. But other countries, like in China, from what I've learned and experienced, is you do not question the master. You just do, right? Like you're learning from like the master acupuncturist, like you don't question. You don't like, why does that work? And how does that work? But we don't live in China and we weren't raised in China and in Asia. We live in a place where we need to understand, but that can get in our way. So this
Yeah.
webinar is specifically to give you that shift in paradigm from that pain center to that pleasure center. You're like, there's some things that are so close together that are the same thing, so that you can set yourself up for success. Because really, what it is, like, we live in the West. We need to kind of know things executively right sometimes. So it's good to have that, but it's interesting that in your process, you would like, I want people to understand the knowledge and know the research and all that stuff so that they can drop into their bodies. But in the, you're shifting more to like doing more of the dropping into your body. And the more,
Mhm.
okay, now, and like actually just saying it, now that we've talked about this stuff, let's do a practice of coming back into our body.
Mhm.
And Francesca's going to do a little meditation for us at the end today. That is what she shows her patients to do, because people are like, what breath should I practice, right? For labor and birth. And um, it's not like that's executive function, right? Like, I guess we've been inundated with like the Lamaze breathing in movies and TV shows for our whole life. So
Yeah.
like that kind of a thing, but that's not really what's going to go on. So really the thought is, sorry, my computer's being fun. Really the thought is the practice of dropping into your body because your body knows. And if it
Exactly.
takes the knowledge sometimes to understand like the statistics and stuff here, so we can drop into our bodies and like follow from our heart. Because we have more nerve signals from our heart to our brain than vice versa. So when somebody says follow your heart, you should. When we get too much brain centered, we actually it becomes like kind of like chewing on the cud of your own thoughts and cyclical thinking and like
Mhm.
spinning a wheel, and that's not something that you want to, a pattern that you want to be in when you're pregnant, before you get pregnant, when you're in labor, when you're trying to go into labor, postpartum, anything, when you get into these like cyclical things, because it doesn't help you um move forward and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
um that's why we're here, and why we do what we do. So I will introduce myself.
Yes.
My name is Marie Baez. I am an acupuncturist and herbalist, and also a certified neuroemotional technique (NET) practitioner. And I have been practicing for over 12 years. And when I had my son, it really, and I had helped a lot of women, but when I had my son, it really kicked um, me into like, we need this support. And I had an amazing pregnancy, an amazing birth, but my postpartum lacked because of the stuff that was going on in my head, because of beliefs that I was saying out loud and hearing with my own ears, and then saying it out loud again and really solidifying these things of like, I'm not going to be a good mom and stuff like that. I did work around that stuff, but not targeted work. And so, what I do, especially with like the acupuncture, working with the physical side, making sure the body is feeling good and rested and nourished and um, all that, so it can grow the baby without thinking, like you do. And then go and then take the emotional um, side of that and make sure that you're in line with what kind of birth you want. Like I said, there's no wrong answer to what kind of birth you want, but you need to be in line with the birth you want. So with neuroemotional technique, we work on um, what you want, and if your body is out of alignment with any of those things. And it doesn't mean you don't want that, but there's a part of you that's like, oh, maybe not so much. That sounds a little scary, natural birth, and every person in my whole family has not had that, and it could be a little bit scary. I've had patients. I had a patient one time that she grew up very Western, and everybody had hospital births. Nothing wrong with that. But then she married a guy from Montana who was like one of seven, homeschooled. Mom had all home births. Like, she was like a homesteading glorious queen, right? In that way, right? And she was so intimidated. She wanted to do a birth center birth. She really wanted it, but she was so intimidated by her mother-in-law that she had so much anxiety around it. So we worked on clearing that. We worked on clearing a few other things around it. And she had the most amazing birth at the birth center that we both work at. So that's what I do, supporting you with needles and herbs and supplements and emotional release. And yes, that's what we do. That is what I do. So now we're going to talk about identifying the possible triggers um, and emotional factors specifically. We kind of touched on that a little bit, but I will start in saying that motherhood and moms is a huge trigger. Whether you love your mom and get along with her, or you don't even talk to your mom, or you're kind of in between with your mom, when you get pregnant, anything that you ever had a problem with motherhood or your mom or a mom figure in your life, it comes right here, and you can't avoid it because you're about to become a mom yourself. So my mom is a glorious mother. She's not perfect, but I love her. We have a great relationship. But the moment I got pregnant, I just got pissed at her for no reason. I was just mad and like thinking that, you know, she's not going to be a good grandmother. She's like the best grandmother. You know what I mean? Like different things. So things about mother that I never worked on really just came to the forefront. So understanding that is really important. In that, do you have anything to add to that, Francesca? Oh, wait. You're on mute. Hold on. Okay, go.
There we go. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess a couple things. So one, just turning to my personal self, this is why I love being able to be so steeped in this world before having kids myself, because I get to learn from people like Marie. I get to learn from all the women and all the mothers that I get to work with that come to my classes, and take in information from their experiences so that I get to then tend to myself in these ways before even becoming pregnant, right? So being in this preconception era, right? For some people, maybe they start thinking about pregnancy 3 months before they get pregnant. Maybe it's 3 years before they decide that they're ready to have a baby. And so I'm very grateful just to have this information, being in this maidenhood of myself,
Yeah.
or of mine. And yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that comes up for a lot of my moms and a lot of my families. Whether it's about, you know, if we're just speaking about the mom or the pregnant parent, it could be just about her mom, it could be about her mother-in-law. It's a massive trigger, and a lot of times I'm not necessarily going down deep into a lot of details. Sometimes people are preserving or reserving those conversations more for therapists or acupuncturists or people that are going to really help them kind of get into the nitty gritty of that. But what I'm facing a lot more in those conversations is, I don't know how to tell my mom I don't want her at the birth, or I don't know how to tell my mother-in-law I don't want her staying in my home for 3 weeks immediately after the baby's born, or even 3 weeks before the baby's born, waiting for me to go into labor. So
Yeah.
a lot of the conversations that I'm specifically having with moms and with parents during that time are around boundaries associated with the birth and that immediate postpartum time right after the birth. And sometimes from those conversations, we do start to unravel a little bit more about those relationships with moms or with mother-in-laws. And I think, like you, Marie, also like myself, most people share, I love my mom. My mom is great, but everyone has shit with their mom, you know?
Totally.
We all carry something. There's always some kind of gradient of a mother wound. And so we find it to be really beneficial to go into that stuff hopefully before you get pregnant. Sometimes though, it, like you said, you might be going along life like la-di-da, everything is so great, and then you get pregnant, you're like, wow, I had no idea I had
Yeah.
all these issues or all this resentment towards my mother. And so working through that stuff while you're pregnant, before you give birth, can be very freeing and very liberating. And your hormones are also really, really heightened, and it's a heightened emotional time being pregnant, in immediate postpartum. And so it can be a little bit more touchy during that time, but there is a really big physical release that happens when, for your birth, when you're able to maybe have some harder conversations with your own mother before that, or maybe it's not something you're conversing with your mom about, but in therapy or with your partner or with your support system, whoever you feel that can really listen, actively listen and support you through that. Without, sometimes we don't need people to necessarily fix it for us. We just need that, like you said, that space holding and that mindset holding for us.
And
So
that's why another reason why I think doulas are so important, is that they spend a little bit more time than your midwife, maybe than your acupuncturist, depending. I mean, I have patients that come to me every week, but they spend more time and more conversation. Like I have conversations with my patients, and sometimes we do a whole thing where it's like for an hour we're just talking and muscle testing and clearing. Um, But you, every time you sit down with a client, like you're there for a few hours and like, how are you doing? How can I support you? So doulas are so important to hold that space before baby cakes comes, in really hearing what you say, maybe be a reflection of like, oh, so this is what I'm hearing. And so these are some of the tips and tricks we are going to tell you right now. When it comes to giving birth, you cannot be an executive function in having a conversation and being in your conscious mind necessarily. Obviously, you're going to be conscious when you're giving birth, but you cannot be like, let me get, do the dishes and all that stuff. So when it comes to the moment you find out you're pregnant, you need to make a list of the boundaries that you are going to keep with your pregnancy, and especially towards the end. Because if you have people coming into town, in-laws coming into town before baby comes, or like your due date's the 20th, we're coming on the 15th, like oh gosh. You're, even if they're staying someplace else, depending on the relationship, I'm not saying all families and friends, but like you can definitely get too much in this mode, this neocortex, frontal lobe, executive function. And you really need to be in like your brainstem and in your body when you go into labor and when you give birth. You can't be worrying that things are going on. So when you get pregnant, you need to decide, and you don't have to do it like immediately and in one day, but talk with your partner about who you want there. I would highly suggest you get a doula. Like we said, a lot of the things that we're saying, it's really important. So you have somebody besides your partner to like reflect things off of. They have a different perspective. They have a different range of people they can refer you to if you need anything, like an acupuncturist because your butt hurts. Because when you have a ton of relaxin in your body and you're gaining weight, which is a good thing when you're pregnant, you are having so much tension and pressure put on these glute muscles that aren't as big as we think they are. And they get so tight. So we need to release those, help your hips be nice and buttery and supple so you're not in pain. So you're resting and recovering at night. So that when you do go into labor, the baby's just like, whoop. I don't know if you saw the email for this. I thought the gift that I
I
put,
thought that was so funny.
where she like sneezes and the baby comes out. And that's our
Yeah.
goal. And I think Francesca and I were talking, like, she was like, I was like, I think I need to be the acupuncturist for all your clients or you won't take them. And you're like, yeah, because I think that you've had a handful of births of clients that we've worked on together,
Mhm.
where it went quick.
Yeah, yeah. I can think of a number of moms in the last 2 years that worked with Marie throughout their pregnancies, and then specifically did your birth prep package that starts at 32 weeks.
Yeah.
And all of those moms, whether it was their second or third baby or just their first, delivering either before or right around their due date, right? So they're not going 2 weeks past their due date, which isn't a bad thing. But a lot of times when you're 41 and a half weeks pregnant, you physically are not feeling so great. Most of those moms are like, I'm ready for the baby to come out. And so just in terms of physical comfort wise, that's a bonus of like having baby out earlier than later.
Yeah.
And then labors that are happening on the faster end, under 6 hours, under, maybe 8 hours for the one first time mom that I'm thinking of. And that's amazing. That's really significant. I've been to many births for first time moms that are 2 days long, 3 days long. And again, these aren't bad things. It doesn't mean that those women weren't preparing or doing all of the things that they were supposed to be doing, but the difference that I see is the women that have worked with Marie have done deep emotional purging and resetting and nervous system resetting around deeper wounds, subconscious things that we don't realize get trapped in our bodies. And when our body or our nervous system thinks, are we safe? Are we okay? Is it okay for me to open and allow all this stuff to come to the surface?
Opening
There's
this
gonna
portal to allow this baby to come into this world.
yeah, there's gonna be a little bit of resistance and a little bit of this holding within the physical body. And so yeah, I remember a few months, this was, maybe a year ago, I was like, okay, all of these women have worked with Marie. There is something very significant to this, where I'm with one first time mom for 8 hours, another first time mom for 3 days, and they did everything the same, except one maybe just didn't do the acupuncture.
Mhm.
So I think we need to, create some kind of
Co-package.
control group study and experiment and really see.
Get like a
um
grant. Let's do it.
yeah, but
But
I
I
mean,
think that's part of it.
I'm sold on it, and that's what
Yeah.
I tell my moms. I'm like, all it's going to do is make you feel more relaxed, make you feel more connected and more confident in your ability to do what you need to do.
Yeah. So we have the boundaries, figure out who
Mhm.
you want there.
Yeah.
Make sure I always tell people, unless you are so close with your in-laws and they can, or parents, and they can come in and like clean your house and do your laundry without you even knowing they're there, and then come and just take the baby while you take a shower. Like, don't have people there for first month after baby cakes is there.
Yeah.
So depend. So look at those relationships. See who can just come in and like do my laundry and feed me. Literally, I had a girlfriend. I love her, Maria. She came and I was having such a hard time breastfeeding that like he was latched and I like couldn't move either of my hands or arms, and she literally spoon fed me.
Yes.
she brought
Yes.
she brought like and Ron was working, and so she brought a chili bowl like with the bread bowl, and she like spoon fed me and like ripped off the bread. And so that's the kind of thing when
Yes.
when you say the kind of birth you want, are people really supportive or not? And if they're not supportive, cut them off. And it doesn't have to be in a mean way, and it doesn't have to be in like never talk to me way. Just have your boundaries around that. So um I ask people, when you tell people the way you're birthing, hospital, birth center, home birth, free birth, whatever it is, do they say, yes, goddess, when can I show up and get you food? Or do they say, oh, okay, well, they don't give medals for that, but I support
Yeah.
you and you're great. Um, that is not real. um, so,
Yeah.
knowing the boundaries around that. And when you start having these boundaries when you're pregnant, before you're pregnant, it's going to help you have boundaries when you have a kid. And it's going to show your kid, your child, how to have boundaries themselves. And
Yeah.
that's what makes the healthy world go round, is good boundaries. So boundaries around who's going to be at the birth, boundaries around who's going to visit you and when, is really important. If they, I think it's like you add a couple hours to a birth, the more people that are in the room. So
Yes.
we decided we just wanted our doula and our midwife, and then the second midwife that came at the end, and that's all we wanted. Because and just in my husband, because if, and I'm not saying my mom wouldn't have been a good, she had 5 kids naturally, glorious, but like I didn't want to have to worry. And like when I thought about my mom being there, I love her, but it like opened up my executive function, and I was like, oh, I have to like be here. And like even to the point where the midwife before we had went into labor was like, Ron, do you want to catch the baby? And he was like, oh, that's a cool question. I was like, absolutely not. You need to be here. Not that I didn't want him to experience that, but like I needed him like right here.
Yeah.
So so knowing those boundaries, and telling people if you do have kids already, and a lot of these are for if you're doing like a home birth or a birth center birth, because you have to be more in your body if you're not doing any pain management in that way. But still, everything in a hospital birth, and even if you're doing an epidural, these things are important.
Mhm.
But knowing who you want there, all that stuff is really important. Yeah. Do you have anything else to say about that?
Yeah. Yeah. No, something I think that I want to highlight that you said is making sure that the people that are supporting you, especially if they're present at the birth, are aligned with your choices for that birth. And what comes to mind for me is I've had a few moms this year that have birthed outside of a hospital at a birthing center. They had both of their moms come with them, or support them at the birthing center, and their moms were nurses, and they had been nurses for 25, 35 years. And so they philosophically were like, oh, of course I support you, natural birth is great. But
Mhm.
in being so steeped in the medical system for their entire careers, and then being in this other environment that feels like there's not medical support, where of course we know there's licensed midwives there, right there,
There's so many
licensed by the
things that
medical
licensed
board.
midwives, yeah, can do that
Yeah,
we don't know.
they're licensed by the Medical Board of California, but being a nurse coming from a hospital setting and then being in that setting, there's a lot of activation that happens in those
Mhm,
grandmas, right? And
mhm.
so they start sharing like, "Oh, are you sure you want to do this any longer?" Or, you don't have to do it like this. And then they start kind of trying to, not trying to, but they start convincing themselves, this is scary, this is dangerous, I'm not familiar. And then that starts kind of leaking out onto the birthing mom. And
Totally, because
so,
when you're in labor, you are in like the in between energetically, and you're so open
totally.
and you're opening that like anything around you is so influencing. I did a Instagram live with my mom, and I was, because
Mhm.
like she said, she had 5 kids, 3 in the hospital naturally, 2 at home naturally. Back in the day, like she did not have it, it was like illegal. She did not have a licensed midwife. She just had a midwife.
Wow.
And she was like, blazing the trail. But I said, what's the one thing that you would tell birthing moms, on my pen, um like as advice? And she says, go to the tree that bears the fruit that you want. So if you want a natural birth at a birthing center at your home, don't go to your girlfriends and people that you know that have had hospital births.
Yeah.
If you want a C-section and you want it to be glorious for you and a good recovery, find multiple people that had a scheduled C-section, that recovered well, that it was a really good choice for them, that they feel at peace about. Go to that person. Just say, tell me your story, and just tell it to me over and over. You don't have to like know tips and tricks from them, but just go to the people. Don't take it. My husband always says this: don't take advice about parenting from people that don't freaking have kids.
Of course. Yeah.
But people that don't have kids give advice all the time. And like, I'm sure
Yeah.
I do stuff like that too, giving advice to people of things I don't have experience of. Like, we're humans, we kind of do that. But like understand. So yeah, maybe it wasn't as good of an idea to have your like Western medicine nurse mom that maybe even worked in the NICU
Mhm.
come to your birth center birth, unless the mom is like, I see what happens there, and I would never wish that on anybody, especially my daughter.
Sure.
This is what I would do. I wish I had this option. Like, that's
Sure.
so looking for those things in your friends and family members. And then the people that aren't fully supportive, like, you don't have to cut them off, but just don't give them um time and the FaceTime, and like you're going to them for the wisdom that they have, because they're just on a different plane than you. So that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's wise for each couple, each family to create different layers of circles. And those different circles are going to get different types of information. So
Mhm.
your inner circle are the friends and family that you're going to, that you're sharing every detail with. You're telling them about your doula and your midwives and just all of it, the whole shebang.
Mhm.
And then that next circle out from there is maybe these are people that you're turning to for support postpartum, that you're like, hey, we're not having visitors yet, but we would love like a meal to drop off. And those are the people that are like, yes, we're here for you, but you're not calling them, texting them, telling them every single detail. And then
Mhm.
there's people in the circles out from there and out from there that maybe are getting the
Third
photos
circle.
or the emails, or once baby's here, hey, baby's here, we love you guys, talk to you whenever, and that's kind
Yeah.
of it. And so, everyone has to decide what that looks like for them and for their family. And I think that's where boundaries get really hard, because sometimes you're like, oh, like my sister is my best friend, but she's very medically, Western medically minded, and I'm not, and she's not going to approve of anything that I'm doing. And so, where she was usually in my inner circle, she's not anymore. And
Yeah.
that can be a really hard
Or
conversation.
or the opposite, or you have a sister that's in San Diego that's an acupuncturist and working with the
Mhm.
birth world, and you are not in San Diego, and you're her sister, and you're doing a hospital birth.
Yeah.
And she calls
Yes.
you all the time and gives you unsolicited advice.
Yeah,
Even
exactly. And so,
not that I'm trying to convince my sisters to do out of hospital births. They're kind of awesome.
no, but it's so true. And it really does speak to, I work with families in any kind of setting, whether it's birth center, home, hospital.
Mhm.
And I, of course, have all of my own preferences on how I would want my birth experience to go, but it all boils down to, where do you feel safe? And because where you feel safe is the only place your body's going to open up and let
Yeah.
your baby out.
Yeah.
If you're in an environment that you don't feel safe in, then it's not going to happen for
It's not
you.
gonna happen.
And so there's a lot of families that do start out at home or do start out at a birth center, and we find out, okay, this setting's not working for us. We probably need to go to the hospital now. And as soon as we get to the hospital, the baby's out in 30 minutes or an hour. And it's because there's this air of safety that comes over the mom of, okay, she needed to be in this setting,
Yeah.
because of whatever reason is lying under that she didn't realize is
Yeah.
there. And that's a lot of actually what kind of comes to the surface for the work that I do and the work that you do, is
Mhm.
we're able to help women kind of tease things out and look at, okay, I've been sold this image of childbirth my entire life, right? In the
And
media,
your mom
pushing
has,
on.
your grandma has, yeah.
Exactly. Pushing on your back in a hospital, yelling at your husband that you hate him, and a doctor yanking your baby out of your body.
Mhm.
And then we're in this new paradigm that's like, hey, home birth, birth center, doula, holistic, unmedicated. This is, better. This is safer.
Mhm.
And so you have a lot of these external things trying to tell you one thing versus the next.
Mhm.
And so it can be really helpful to work with professionals that have seen all different ends of it. And I think, at least I try to do a really good job of showing up in a really neutral place and helping people to lay it all out and figure out what is true for you and
What
for
is
your
true for you?
body and for
Which is,
your family.
yeah.
Because I can tell you all the different horrors in the world about, you know, medical snafus that happen, but you might have heard all the horrors in the world of home birth snafus that have happened.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's really just about distilling it down to each person's unique
Yeah.
experience, and that's why
Yeah.
having a birth professional is important, because um, we're not able to get that individualized care within the medical system. And working with a midwife, you are able to get more individualized care, but having those other practitioners and providers like a doula, like an acupuncturist, a massage therapist, we are all able to take you down to those deeper levels.
Yeah. Well, and that's
Yeah,
why I really like working at Tourmaline, and the midwives there have really made it a place. So they're not just like come as you are, and if you risk out of being here, that's your own thing. Like they give you the tools, and they have the community there of the people that can help them.
mhm,
Like if they have low-lying placenta, they send them to me. If they have placenta previa, like we've moved some placentas and different things like that. So they're not just trying to opt you out of care. They're trying to, like, if this is the birth you want, this is what you do, right?
right. Yeah.
My dog, Pepita, it's okay, we're safe. Sorry, my dog.
Oh,
um, and so doing these things. So if you want to do um, more of a holistic shift, understand where we're coming from as humans in this world, in this Western world where we've seen this stuff our whole lives, and maybe our parents. I always knew I could do it. I did a home birth with my son because I physically watched my mom push my sister out. I was
yeah.
right there when I was almost 8 years old. I was 7. I knew it. Like I never had a doubt. And then my younger sister had a baby before me, and she did a hospital birth with no epidural and had an 11-pound, 3-ounce baby,
Wow.
unmedicated in a hospital setting. Especially, and even before that, the doctor kept wanting to induce her because she's like, why is the baby's heart? She had really, we had, I guess for some reason, really strong like sense of like, I can do this because of what our mom went through, and that's important. I think that really helped me. And so if you're coming from a place where you want to do a birth like I did, and like more of a home birth and stuff, and you don't have that experience in your life, you can still get there, but you might have a little bit more work to do. You might have a little
Exactly.
bit more. I was talking to a midwife one time, and she worked in Pennsylvania, I want to think, with a lot of the Amish community. And these women were they would have first time babies in like an hour or two. Like
Yeah.
it was just culturally, that's what, and you just push the baby out and there you go back to life. Like, so
Yeah.
it's understanding that we're not necessarily Amish women and surrounded by women just birthing around us all the time and seeing that. So if
Yeah.
you want to get that kind of a birth, you have to understand that you have to do a lot of things to get yourself to that space. Just wanting it isn't enough sometimes. Um,
Exactly.
so one more thing, I know we're talking boundaries, but one of my favorite things to tell people is earlier on in your pregnancy, let friends and family know, if you don't even have to tell them your due date or window, but make sure that before you're in your third trimester, that you let your friends and family know that you are not available and your baby is not an Amazon package. We're not having a tracking app and it's like on its way out for delivery here on your front porch, like the stork brought it. But that's not how it goes. And if people are texting you all the time, you're here in your executive function, in your frontal lobe, in your neocortex, and you cannot go into labor doing that. So having a bunch of people, because with the technology we have, having people reach out to you in so many ways is like having them visit sometimes.
Mhm.
So making sure what we did, we had an app called Cluster that we did. And I think a couple months before my due date, we just, all the people that we wanted to be involved, we were like, we have this app called Cluster. Do you want to be a part of it? So, when we go into labor, when baby cakes is here and you don't have to reach out to us. So do not reach out to us. And they were like, sure. So we put like a handful of people, I don't know, it was a good amount of people because it was like our inner circle and our next circle,
Mhm.
and we put them on there, and then we did like our first post saying like, this is about, we didn't know if we were having a boy or girl. So baby B is coming. And at this time we're saying like radio silence. I think it was like a couple months before. You will know when we go into labor, and then if you don't hear anything after that, you'll know when we're in a place, and then baby cakes is here. So, and the way my birth went, Ron was able to post little videos and pictures throughout. Although I wouldn't necessarily suggest being on your phone a bunch because that's also executive. I never had my phone. So like on the down times when I wasn't having like huge surges and contractions, like, like I was like, I need chocolate. And so he like left at 3 in the morning and went up to the 7-Eleven looking for dark chocolate at 7-Eleven. There was, he found like a Kit Kat, dark chocolate Kit Kat. But like he made like, he's like, hi, hey everybody, how's it going? 3 a.m. here and I'm walking up to 7-Eleven because Marie wants chocolate and Marie wants chocolate, I want chocolate. Like it's really funny. And so then people were able to kind of get updates when we were ready and they didn't bug us.
Yeah.
They weren't in our space and asking. But people get really excited and don't realize, because we live in this society where you just go to the hospital and maybe you get an epidural, maybe you don't, maybe you get a C-section, maybe you don't, and it's not really important that you're out of executive function. They get really excited and they're like, when is my grandbaby here, or my niece or my nephew? And they just like, are they here yet? How are you feeling? How are you feeling? And it's like, stop asking me how I feel.
Yeah.
You need to like go into yourself and be kind of alone with you're just yourself or you and your partner. Um,
Yeah.
so doing an app, and or a group text. And what I tell people, I always volunteer doulas. I say, find like the main person in your friend group and the main person in your family that are like the point people, and have them be on a group text with your doula. Ask your doula if that's okay. And so that when you go into labor, you don't even have to post a picture or send out a text that we're in labor, right? You have that one person that is in contact with you, your doula, and they just say, hey, we're going into the hospital, send your prayers, light your candle, do whatever you do.
Yeah.
Good night, whatever it is. And then that really helps. And sometimes they're like, oh yeah, my husband's doing that now. No, no, no. But like when or your partner, like when you're there, like at least for me, and if you're not this way, I needed him like there. And
Mhm.
so I couldn't really, I don't know. He did little videos here and there when you know, when he could.
Yeah.
But like I couldn't with the texting. That's why we did the app before. I needed him to just be present and be there with me. And if he was at work and I went into labor, I needed to be able to like call him and him not have to be like, okay, I have to like tell my clients I'm going to cancel for the rest of the day, and now I have to call and tell everybody that Marie's in labor and blah, blah, blah. Like that's
Yeah.
too much. He just needs to like really just say like, hey, going home from work, come home, and there we go.
Yeah. Well, something that I even tell families too, because I've seen a lot of dads like 5 minutes after the baby's born, just like updating the group text or updating the app or doing whatever, because labor has been a day and a half, and everyone's like, we have been on the edge of our seats for a day and a half since you told us that this baby was coming. And
Mhm.
so then dads feel this obligation of like, okay, now I need to respond right away once the baby's here. So I tell
And
people,
then yeah, don't even
I'm
tell them
like,
you're in labor.
yeah, and sometimes, if people are really close with their family, they're like, I'm gonna tell them I'm in labor. And so I'm like, okay, great. Like you're gonna figure out like what timeline works for you. But just know that the sooner you tell them you're in labor and the
Mhm.
longer your labor goes, the more anxiety, the more people are breaking boundaries. And I feel like the more pressure that dad has to be on the phone. And so I
Yeah.
love your suggestion of having your doula be that point of contact, because it really is so important for dads to get to just be really present and be
Just
with
be
mom.
there.
Um,
Yeah, not be on their phone all the time, just like be there.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a good point too, because I am a unique case. Nobody in my family was like, "What?" Like I had a couple patients be like, oh, "Wait, not at the hospital?" And I was like, you know me, like I'm made of girls."
Yeah.
Um, but apparently they didn't, but that's okay. Like nobody in my like sphere of influence with like friends and family like balked at it at all. And because I knew that I could do this and my mom did this and my sister did this, like um I didn't have that. So it is, you look at your circle and see where these people are and where they're aligned and where you're aligned with how you want your birth story and your parenthood and all that stuff to go. And if it's totally opposite, maybe don't tell them. I'm having patients start, not, I'm not telling them, but I'm having patients start to tell me that they're um, not telling people their due date at all. I'm like, great. And like sometimes they don't even tell them they're doing a birth center birth. Um,
Yeah.
um, that's your prerogative. And if you're not aligning with certain people, then that's something to look at. So once again, we're kind of beating a dead horse, but it's a horse that I love. And this is great. I just want to get it across that like boundaries are important, and just to be aware of like where you're aligned and where people around you are aligned, and make decisions
Yeah.
accordingly and do it as early as possible.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. I think we're harping on it so much because it completely creates the atmosphere of your experience. And so if you want to feel like you can surrender into your body and surrender into your breath and really like check out of your brain, you
Mhm.
have to make sure other people are going to respect that and be on board. And so that's why we drive that point home so much. It's not just about being like, I have really strong boundaries. It's that if these boundaries are broken, you might feel like your entire birth experience isn't going the way you want.
Mhm.
And this is supposed to be one of the most beautiful days of our lives.
Yeah.
And so that's why we are so protective around it.
Yeah, because it is. I mean, my birth was the most magical experience of my whole life. Was it intense? Heck yeah. Did I experience intenseness in my lady areas? Oh yeah. There was a point where I was crowning and I started in my head singing, "I fell into a burning ring of fire." And then I would like literally have this conversation in my whole head. I'm like pushing and I'm like, if you start singing that, you're gonna laugh and the baby's gonna like go all the way up into your brain. Like it won't be even like you're crowning, you've got here, you finally got here. And then I remember telling Josie, my midwife, afterwards, she's like, no, you should have said it. You should have started singing because we all would have laughed, and like laughing helps.
Yeah.
Like there's I don't know. Oh, sorry. Pepita. Sorry. Wonderful. Um, when there's a woman that was in a coma that gave birth while she was in a coma.
Yes.
that speaks to our bodies can do this without us.
Mhm.
But 90% is here. So,
Yeah,
and Josie was probably right. If I would have started singing that, because I'm just kind of like a goofy, funny person, like I probably would have laughed the baby out. It would have probably relaxed, and I probably wouldn't have felt like the Ring of Fire feeling
right.
as much, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely.
It wasn't forever, but it was what it was. But anyways, so we digress. Like, that we just want to set you up to make decisions in the beginning of your pregnancy, the middle, and towards the end that are going to set you up to be in a place where you can be in a place of surrender, in a place of peace and calm, because that's going to help you in your postpartum a lot too. A lot of the work I do is being okay being a mother and releasing anything around that, being okay having 2 kids, 3 kids, 4 kids, whatever it is, 1 kid, um, because a lot of times our fear of what we really want, but like that was me. I was like, yeah, pregnancy, it seems glorious. Birth seems glorious. Motherhood seems scary as heck. And it was. And I like self-fulfilled that. So I wish I had me or somebody like me to do the NET work around that, to like
Mhm.
clear all the stuff that I was holding on to about fear of being a mom and inadequacy and unworthy and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying that I wouldn't have had some of the same stuff go on in my postpartum, but I would have been able to be stronger around it and come
yeah.
out of it faster. So it didn't prevent me from going into labor, because I was like, labor, I've always wanted to experience this, right? And I know I could do it, but it can prevent moms from going to labor. I had one time at Tourmaline where a mom was already in labor and they're like, her water broke. She has to be in active labor by 8 o'clock tonight, and she's holding on. Went in and I did NET with her. And what came up is that she had to uninvite her mom and sister to the birth like a week or two before,
Mm.
because they weren't in alignment with her doing a birth center. I think they were like, yeah, she's lying, she's lying. She's like, wait, no, we really don't support this. And they didn't support her being in a birth center. So we released that. We needled her a little bit. She ended up going into active labor. And I think during all that turmoil, the baby actually turned breech, which is illegal to do as a midwife. But if it's a surprise
Yeah.
breech, so baby was head down whole pregnancy, in the beginning of labor, everything. And then baby during all this time turned breech, but she was able to
Wow.
like give birth to this breech baby and everything was glorious. And there ended up being meconium because I think she was in labor for so long, but nothing was in the baby, because then they were like, I think it was like a blessing the baby came feet first, because it kind of went like,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I
That's
wasn't there.
amazing.
That's just what the dad told me afterwards. I'm like, that kind of makes sense. Like, like,
Yeah, yeah, seriously.
so anyways, um, so we're gonna just do one more thing here. Oh, I wanted to say two more things. So, doulas are more prominent around the globe. So get one. And so what Francesca and I were talking about earlier is that when you have a doula, what are the stats again?
Yeah, so having the support of a doula, at least just at your birth, can lower the risk of a cesarean anywhere from 25 to 55%, which is a big reason that a lot of people hire doulas. They want to reduce that risk of unnecessary interventions. And it's not that we're usually starting with a cesarean as an unnecessary intervention, but when we start with the little things first, we have that cascade of interventions that can then lead us to a cesarean, or what a lot of people call unnecessarians. So yeah, having a doula support, anywhere from 25% to 55%. And that's about the same for maternal mortality as well, which is,
Yeah, yeah.
um, in the US, we have the highest maternal mortality rate of any other developed nation in the world.
Mhm.
And our rates actually get worse every year. Pretty much all other developed countries are improving, and we are continuing to worsen in that area.
Mhm.
And so
And it's
having
also higher in certain populations, right?
it's much higher for Black women. It's much higher for just BIPOC women in general, any women of color, or Indigenous background, and also in different regions as well. And so that's why, like we were saying before, Marie, like being in Southern California, being in San Diego,
Yeah.
there's different pressures in the hospitals. We're not getting the same kind of pressure that women and birthing parents are getting down in the South or in New York or even up in LA, which is not far from us.
Yeah.
And so region also plays a big factor, and looking at what is the population at large bringing to the hospitals as their birth preferences, and that's how those initial waves start. When I first started as a doula 3 years ago, the hospital dynamics were very different. I had different attitudes, a lot of doctors and nurses that would shun me, act like I did not exist. And
Mhm.
if I try to speak to them, there would, I got to some experiences where I was threatened to be kicked out of the hospital if I didn't stop asking questions. Whereas now, especially in the last 6 months, I've noticed a really big change. I've noticed a lot more informed consent, a lot more nurses saying, look, this is our protocol here. You're going to make whatever decision you're going to make for yourself. We're going to give you guys some time. And
And
I've been looking
that's
around like, what
yeah,
the
that's
heck?
because
What's going
patients are
on?
coming to them. And like that's
Yeah.
also why I think like San Diego is a mecca, even in
Yeah.
hospitals. I'm hearing like, oh, this hospital lets you eat during labor. Because most
Yeah.
hospitals don't. And I think nutrition is actually a really important part of
Mhm.
birthing, because you need the energy. And if you're in labor for a lot of time, you haven't maybe done the work of what
Yeah.
emotionally keeping you from opening. Um, then you're gonna run out of energy. And like some in the hospital, they don't want to do that because if they have to do a C-section or any kind of surgery, they don't want you vomiting, all the different things.
Right.
But I am hearing even hospitals here, they're letting people eat, which is so important and so key. And I am seeing that shift here. So I think it starts in certain places that are meccas of certain places. Because like the San Diego community, it's an interesting community. We have a lot of military
Yeah.
moms. Like, they're here and they're like, it's glorious. This is what I want. They really want this kind of a birth. And then they get it here. And so even if they're going to
Yeah.
like the military hospital or another hospital, like that's what they want. And so across the country and across the globe, we need to start asking about these things. Like, can I eat? Why can't I eat? This is my birth plan. This is, I'm going to bring this doula in here to hold space. So while I am out of executive function, they're holding space for me, and they could have executive function going, asking questions. When a hospital comes and says it's their protocol that, this long after something happens or then this is the next step, a doula could come and say, hey, um, can we check the baby's heart rate in a different way? Can we wait 1 more hour? She's had 3 other babies, all healthy, no problems, healthy pregnancy, healthy mama, all these, like, there's things that they could do that you don't need to do at a hospital, even if you have an epidural. Cause like sometimes certain epidurals, you do feel some stuff. I had a
Oh,
mom that she got an epidural, and the baby did not react well to it, and she still wanted to do a vaginal delivery, so they had to turn the epidural off. So she
yeah.
was like feeling everything, did some good laboring for a good amount of time with all the feels. Then they did the epidural, and she was like, I could still feel it a little bit, but and then the baby wasn't reacting well, so they turned it all the way off, and she had to. So it was like there's
Yeah.
some things that you do in any setting, but doulas can really be there for that.
One thing that I did want to plug into all of that or just acknowledge is that, um, like we said before, sometimes these rates for maternal mortality or increased C-section, those are higher rates for women of color. And even though we have a better culture, I think here in the hospitals in San Diego, my experiences that I've had with my clients that are white, there could be a Black woman having her birth with that same nursing team and that same doctor and have a wildly different experience. And so there is an app, it's called Earth app, IRTH. And it's actually an app that rates providers at different hospitals all over the country so
Oh,
that women of color can go onto that app, right? And
and
so
who's there
then
for
they can
their
see
with more
they can
education?
see like how have these different doctors or different nurses been rated, right? This white woman had a really wonderful experience, but this indigenous woman did not, or this Hispanic woman did not. And so it gives them a little bit more of a real time experience, or real
I'm
time
with you.
breakdown of what might your experience look like, what might you be up against in these different hospital settings.
Mhm.
So I always like to acknowledge that when talking about the discrepancies across race with birth, because it is very severe. I think in New York, specifically in Manhattan, I think Black women are 8 times more likely to die than white women in childbirth. And I think nationwide, it's the statistic is 4 to 1. So definitely a very important piece of the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's good to like have that review so that you can maybe choose your doctors, because we do understand San Diego is like a magical unicorn pony mecca.
Yeah,
There's not birth centers and midwives everywhere across the country. So even if it's something
yeah,
you want, it's not always available all the time.
yeah,
As time progresses, it's getting stronger. Like the midwifery uh, profession was almost completely wiped out, and it's starting to make its resurgence back. So
yeah,
just keep asking questions. If you're living in a part of the country that you don't have that support available to you, you can still have the birth you want. Get a doula. There's a lot of people, and like, and we have a doula that we know that became a doula because her son's his wife got pregnant, and he goes, "Hey mom, I want you to be our doula." And she was like, "I googled it, and doula means servant." I like that word, not like the
yeah,
profession. And she was like, "What? You want to be a servant?" Like, I don't. He's like, "No, read this book." And so she read it, and then she was a doula for her grandchild. And then like all of her grandchild, and then she was like, "This is great." And then she went and they did like there's a volunteer doula program at UCSD. Is it UCSD?
yeah,
So she did that for a really long time, and she's like the ultimate mama. I'm like, what
yeah,
kind of doula? Because I know a bunch of doulas. I'm like, what kind of a doula do you want? Do you want like mama, like energy and like knows her shit? Like this is the person. So
yeah,
there's a lot of resources. We are here for you. If you live here, we're here for you. We have resources everywhere, and we can help you find things.
yeah.
We're gonna do one more thing. You're gonna do a little breath work thing. So, like we talked about before, there's not like breath work you can practice, but
Right.
like just like a little. Can you do a little guided meditation for us that
Yeah,
maybe would
yeah,
maybe take a
absolutely.
client through, like a couple seconds, maybe a couple minutes?
Yeah, we'll just do like maybe like 5 breaths through of a breathing practice that I do a lot, oftentimes in my yoga classes. But if everyone wants to just take a seat, feel nice and comfortable, really important to feel your sits bones against whatever you're sitting against, if that's a floor or a chair. If you're on a chair, make sure your feet are solid against the ground. Start by bringing your awareness down into your pelvic floor. So you might pulse your pelvic floor up a couple times just to create a little sensation there so you can feel rooted at that base of the body. And then from the pelvic floor, just start to lengthen your spine up to the ceiling, roll your shoulders back and down, nice and long in the back of the head. And as you inhale, that awareness down at the pelvic floor starts to trace up the front line of the spine. Your inhale travels up with your gaze, tracing all the way up to the top of the head. And as you exhale, the breath and your awareness traces down the back line of the body, the back of the spine, looping all the way back down to the pelvic floor. Again, we'll inhale, gaze and breath up the front line of the body. Exhale, gaze and breath down the back line. We'll do 3 more cycles, inhaling up. Exhale, send the breath and your gaze down the back. Twice more. And one last time. We'll pause for just a moment. You could start to drop your chin down towards your chest. Gently just blink your eyes open, and we'll come back into our space. So that practice is called a micro-orbital or microcosmic breathing practice. And I really love that because we're bringing all of our awareness and breath into the spine and into our central nervous system. And so I like to kind of imagine that we're smoothing out any kinks in the nervous system, and we're coming into our center, we're coming into our core. We don't really spend a lot of time going inward. We spend most of our time focused on the external and interacting with the outside world. And so it's a really simple, easy practice to start connecting to yourself internally. And that deep breathing that we need in labor, that inhale through the nose, filling up our belly, filling up our pelvis, and then those big exhales out with the moans and the groans and the yells. That's going to all be pretty innate after a while. It's not something you have to really practice regularly. I would say the practice is coming inward and then spending that time within yourself.
Yeah. And then, yeah. And I always tell moms, like, just visualize yourself roaring like a birthing goddess, like roaring that baby out. And it could be like an audible or an inaudible. I always like the audible, but some people aren't that way.
Yeah.
It's glorious. So I love that. And then one more thing, if you are coming across a stressor immediately that you are recognizing in your path at a current moment, I'm going to do a technique called FAST. It is adjacent to the neuro-emotional technique. And this can just really help. It's very similar to your breath work, but it just helps you kind of come in, breathe it out, and not take that stressor and be like, ooh, and then like, I'm going to store it right here or right here. So if you are, this is people that aren't pregnant as well. Anybody could do this. It's really good to teach kids how to do this too. Really easy. So you're going to put your fingers on all, so the pulse points here that connect to the meridians are here, and then there's an extra one that we use in NET that's right here. So you just literally, you don't have to be super specific. You're going to put your fingers here where you could feel your pulse. Okay, so you're going to do it this way though. Okay, so you're going to put your four fingers there, and then you're going to cover your forehead, and if you can in your situation, you're going to come forward and be as much of a fetal position as possible. When we get in a fetal position, it's a safe space. Our nervous system is easier, is able to release and be in a safe place to release emotions. So you're going to put your fingers on those points. You're going to put your hand all the way across your forehead, full contact, and you're going to come forward, maybe putting your elbows on your knees in that, and just breathe in and out and kind of notice where in your body, what that acute stressor, where it is, how it makes you feel. Does it make you feeling pissed off? If you're anger, irritable, anything like that, you do big inhales. Exhale out the mouth. A more exaggerated sigh. So you're going to just do breaths like that. You could do light pressure on the pulse points and then put a little bit deeper pressure on those pulse points. Big deep breath in, out, and visualize whatever that is coming out of your body. If you're visual, I always say visualize you're either pooping it out or vomiting it out or sweating it out. Inhale, bring that breath to the space in your body where you feel the tension. Exhale. Now you can switch hands, switch pulses, same pulses on the other side, light pressure, big inhale, exhale. You could do a little bit firmer pressure now to get to the other pulse points. Big inhale, big exhale. And then do that until you feel like that tension, like the edge come off, or it shifts or changes. So then you could just come up and be glorious. So that's something you could do at work if you need to be like somebody's bugging you. You're like, I need to use the restroom, and you can go into the restroom and do that. Or if you feel comfortable doing it in front of people, it's great. Do it.
I
Big
love it.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Once again, my name is Marie Baez. I am an acupuncturist and owner at Glorious Balance Wellness. You can look me up at gloriousbalancewellness.com. You can shoot me a text at 619-631-5339 if you have any questions. And Francesca, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can find me online at figjadewellness.com. You can also feel free to text me. My phone number is 949-702-0076. I'm sure when you email this out, Marie, we can have all that written down and whatnot. But yeah, feel free to find me through either of those forms. I have a contact page on my website. And yeah, any questions that you have, even if it's just very general, you're just hearing about doulas for the first time, you want to get a little bit more information.
Mhm.
I'm here for all of it. And any other resources that you're needing in the birth world, Marie and I are also here as well. If you're like,
Yeah.
I need a mental health specialist, I need a pelvic floor therapist, we can
Yeah.
help you get
Those are
connected
all
with the people
so
that you need.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also know that when you find these people, you don't have to find somebody exactly like me as an acupuncturist or an NET practitioner. You don't have to find somebody exactly like Francesca. Um, find who works for you. Remember, it's that shift, like what is working for you, what feels good for you. Um, I worked with a patient one time, and we had to do NET around letting her doula go because it just wasn't a good fit.
Mhm.
She's like, I don't know, she's a good person. I'm like, you're not feeling comfortable, right? So it's always good to know different people and know what you want and take time to make your decisions about things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank
What great
you.
information. All right. So let us know if you have any questions, and we will see you guys soon.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Marie. Thank you, everyone.